Family Guy has been on the air for 17 seasons now, and is without a doubt one of the best-loved cartoon comedies out there. But even though it has been around for so long, there are still some facts about the show that might just knock your socks off, even if you're a super fan. You might think that Chris Griffin is just another teenager trying to make his way through high school alive, but actually there's something pretty messed up about him that might just surprise you. Seth Green, who has voiced Chris since the beginning, actually based the character's voice off of none other than Buffalo Bill, the super disturbing serial killer from The Silence of the Lambs.
What's the problem, officer?
He had been playing around with the impression with a few friends of his, and they actually dared him to do it in the audition. If that doesn't make you think differently about Chris, the fact that he later recreated a famous scene from the movie on an episode of Family Guy sure will. Now that the show has been on for so many years and is such a part of television history, it's pretty much impossible to imagine anyone else voicing the iconic characters we know so well. But Brian Griffin could have sounded very, very different, because none other than William H Macy auditioned for the role.
You darn tootin'.
The character most closely associated with Seth Macfarlane himself was almost somebody else. Apparently, Macy heard about the show and was really interested in the role, but the show wasn't given much money to do their pilot, and they couldn't afford the already famous actor. The role went back to Seth. We wonder just how differently the character of Brian would have evolved over the years with someone like Macy behind him. We see the Griffin family sit down around the dinner table and eat. A lot. You'd think that after 17 seasons they'd mix things up a little, but in reality, the family literally eats the same thing every single time they sit down at the table. If they're not out at a restaurant, every dinner in the Griffin household is made up of mashed potatoes, peas, and 3 pieces of an unnamed meat. This is probably because it looks best in the animation style and makes things a little bit easier. But seriously, you'd think they'd be tired of it by now. We've all tried to get on that meal prep bandwagon, but by day 3 of the same chicken and broccoli, we can't even stand to look at it anymore. Imagine the same meal every night for almost 2 decades. Of course, being cartoon characters and totally fictional probably does help a bit. While we all know that the writers behind Family Guy aren't afraid to push every button out there, believe it or not, there is actually a lot that they aren't allowed to say, at least on television. That's why there are actually 2 versions of almost every episode, the one that airs on TV and then the one that goes on the DVDs and streaming services. One particularly edgy gag that involves a promo for The Simpsons that is interrupted by Quagmire running onto the screen and having his way with Marge before killing the whole family never made it to TV. We wonder why. We know there's a legendary Simpsons Family Guy feud going on, but come on, man! What did Marge ever do to anybody? Like we mentioned before, Family Guy has been airing for all of 17 years, which is a pretty amazing gig for all the actors and crew who have been along for the ride. As an actor, it's rare to get a job that lasts 2 months, let alone 2 decades, especially when you consider the fact that in 2013, it was revealed that each cast member rakes in $175,000 to $250,000 per episode. And that was 6 years ago. So there is no doubt whatsoever that it has gone up since then. While they definitely work hard, it's still a pretty amazing salary for a job that you can go to in your pajamas, no less. Much like the food they eat, the characters in Family Guy have been rocking their signature look since the first moment we saw them. Who would Lois be without her green button-up and khakis? Or Quagmire without his Hawaiian shirt? Or Meg without her famous pink hat? But what you might not realize is that Peter has actually been wearing a woman's blouse the entire time. While it might seem like a minor detail, you'll notice that his shirt actually buttons up on the right side, which only women's styles are known to do. Maybe it was an animation mistake that they had to stick with, or maybe Peter just prefers a breezier fabric and a more flattering cut. We'll never know. Whatever the reason, Peter seems to have found his signature look, and it's still working for him after all these years. Meg has been the butt of the joke for as long as we can remember, and while she may not be the best character out there, we never really got why they treated her so badly. Sure, she's no Connie D'Amico, but she's nice enough, and hasn't done anything so terrible that wasn't spurred on by her family's antagonizing anyway. Well, Seth Macfarlane actually answered the question, and the answer isn't great. He said that the writers of the show had no idea how to write for a teenage girl, and so their solution was just to make fun of her all the time. Another solution might have been to, hire someone who could write for her. All of Seth Macfarlane's voices have become iconic at this point, not only for their uniqueness and distinction, but for how many he can seem to do, and how easily. So where do all of these voices come from? Does he just make them all up? Well, the origin of Peter might surprise you. His exaggerated Rhode Island accent was actually inspired by a security guard who worked at the college that Macfarlane went to, the Rhode Island School of Design. He used to imitate the man's voice for his friends, who got such a kick out of it that it became a regular part of his repertoire, and would eventually become one of the most well-known voices in cartoon history. If you're a true Family Guy fan, you've seen all of the episodes, including the very rough first season. It's notable for its less sophisticated animation style and slightly different voices for all the characters. The most notable difference is, of course, Meg, who wasn't voiced by Mila Kunis until season 2. But what you might not know is that her original voice is actually Lacey Chabert. That doesn't ring a bell? How about Gretchen Weiners? That's right, Lacey went on to star as the heir to the toaster strudel fortune in the iconic movie Mean Girls, after her departure from Family Guy. Most TV shows strive to make it onto all of the best of lists out there, but there's one very different kind of list that Family Guy has been on a record number of times, for which they are probably quite proud of. That's right, an organization called the Parents Television Council has named Family Guy Worst Show of the Week, a record-breaking 44 times for all sorts of content that they deem inappropriate. While some might be upset to be included on a list like that, we'd bet money that Seth Macfarlane and his crew strive to stay on it. Amidst all of the gags and cutaways and 10-minute-long chicken fights, Family Guy actually isn't afraid to make a statement every now and again. And usually these statements come from Brian, who it's known shares the same opinions as his creator, Seth Macfarlane. One statement in particular had quite the impact back in 2009. In the aptly titled episode 420, Brian advocates for the legalization of marijuana with a very catchy song, Bag of Weed, a remix on the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang original song, Me Ol' Bamboo. The song earned Brian the title of Stoner of the Year from High Times magazine. And with legalization happening more rapidly all over the world these days, it seems like Brian was really onto something. Just like we can't hear any other voices associated with the much-beloved characters of Family Guy, changing up their looks is just downright off-putting, which makes it really weird that Lois was actually originally a blonde. In the pilot episode, before the one that would make it to the air, Lois has blonde hair and a red shirt on, which is just wrong if you ask us. Apparently, the color of her hair was hotly debated by the writers' room after the series was greenlit by Fox, and her iconic red locks won in the end. While Lois being a blonde would have definitely explained Chris's hair color a little bit, we just can't imagine her any other way than red. While the town of Quahog might be fictional, Rhode Island is definitely real, located in New England and very famous for its seafood. So much so that the show references clams any chance it gets, especially when it can be used as a not-so-subtle double entendre, which is pretty much always. Dirty jokes aside, it might seem weird that the show is so fixated on clams, but actually it all makes a ton of sense. We know Peter and his buddies drink at a bar called the Drunken Clam, but what you might not know is that Quahog itself is actually a type of clam, and is the official seafood of Rhode Island. 2009 was a big year for Family Guy, and not just for Brian's previously mentioned Stoner of the Year accolade. It also marked the year that the show was nominated for Outstanding Comedy Series at the Primetime Emmy Awards. They have been nominated for many awards before, and won a handful, but generally in voice acting, animation, and musical categories. Because, let's face it, nobody does big splashy musical numbers quite like Family Guy. This was actually the first time that an animated show had been nominated in that particular category, which is typically reserved for live-action TV series. Quagmire is a bit of a mysterious character, and is definitely polarizing. Sometimes he's downright hilarious, and sometimes he really should go to jail. But there was one moment in the show that fans have pretty much forgotten about. In Season 7, they casually reveal a crazy bit of information about Quagmire that makes very little sense, but that haunts us to this day. In the episode, Foxy Lady, Peter and the guys ask to see Quagmire's driver's license, which reveals that he was born in 1948, which made him 61 years old at the time that it aired, and 71 years old today. His simple secret? Carrots. Apparently though, don't ask him to show you what he does with them. Trust us. It's no secret that Seth and the rest of the team behind Family Guy are huge Star Wars fans. But the reason that they've been able to pay as much homage to the iconic movie series is due to the permission of the man himself, George Lucas. A few years into the series, they had already referenced the movies a ton of times before getting nervous that there would be copyright issues. So they reached out to George and his company Lucasfilm. As it turned out, he was a huge fan of the show and gave them his blessing to do pretty much whatever they wanted. And boy, did they. It's pretty common for comedies to have all kinds of catchphrases, and Family Guy is no different. But rather than the ones like "What the deuce?" that got phased out after a couple of seasons as the characters became more grounded and human, there is one turn of phrase that has really stuck around. And no, it's not what you're thinking. In every single episode of the show, one character or another says a version of the words "What the hell?" Seriously, in every single episode. We guess it's because the show is just shocking everyone, including its characters at all times. It might seem as though Seth Macfarlane was destined to become king of the cartoon world, but actually it was a bit of a surprise, even for him. Right as he was graduating the Rhode Island School of Design, one of his teachers secretly submitted his final animation project to a contest at Hanna-Barbera. Before he knew it, Macfarlane had won the contest he didn't even know that he entered, and the famed animation company asked him to move to Los Angeles to come and write for them. If you've ever wondered why the show feels familiar, the fact that Macfarlane cut his teeth on shows like Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Laboratory, and Cow and Chicken, we hope he at least sent that unnamed professor a basket of mini muffins once he landed in LA. The cartoon that got Seth Macfarlane his spot at Hanna-Barbera was called The Life of Larry, which featured a character named Larry, shocking, we know, who was definitely an early prototype of our now beloved Peter. While working at Hanna-Barbera, he continued to develop his own characters and writing skills, which led to his next project. Macfarlane created another short called Larry and Steve, in which Larry adopts a dog named Steve, who, you guessed it, closely resembles Brian. Larry and Steve aired in 1997 on Cartoon Network as part of a series of shorts called What a Cartoon, and the rest, it seems, was history. Family Guy seems perfect in its 30-minute episodic format because of the ways that it pays homage to the classic family sitcoms that came before it, and a show featuring a certain yellow family from a town called Springfield that shall remain nameless. But Family Guy was almost a totally different show. After his short Larry and Steve was well received, he pitched an idea to the people behind the late-night comedy sketch show Mad TV. Family Guy almost made it to air for the first time as a series of animated sketches on the show, just like how The Simpsons got their start on the Tracy Ullman Show. Apparently, Mad TV didn't have quite the budget for that kind of animation, but we think it all worked out in the end. Family Guy has always been a divisive show, not just for their edgier content, but amongst the community of animated shows as well. While the beef with The Simpsons has been public and famous, seeing as how these similarities between the two shows are undeniable, it is actually Matt Stone and Trey Parker who have been among the most vocal of their critics. The South Park creators have criticized the show's cutaway gags as lazy, and been open about how they don't respect that writing style. They aren't alone, however. Apparently, they even received flowers from the producers of King of the Hill and The Simpsons in solidarity. While they might not all get along, Parker and Stone said their shared hatred of Family Guy really bonded these three cartoon families together. While the voice of Meg has changed since the pilot, the brilliant Alex Borstein was always Lois from the very beginning, and it would be just too weird to hear anyone else deliver her lines. But apparently, we almost lost her because of the Fox network. After the pilot aired, and the series was greenlit for its first season, the network apparently had decided to change the direction they wanted to go with the character of Lois, and Borstein actually had to re-audition with every other voice actress in Hollywood. Thankfully, they came to their senses and recast her in the role, and Lois's iconic nasal voice has become legendary ever since. While creating any show from the ground up is a ton of work, making a weekly animated show is a seriously amazing feat. It actually takes an entire year to get an episode on the air, from the story development phase through writing each episode to recording all of the voices and finally the animation stage. The entire process is huge and spans continents. They have to work on multiple episodes all at the same time to make any of this possible, so the combined amount of effort is almost unimaginable. We all know that fans are passionate about what they love, and fans just love Family Guy. That's why, when the show took a huge risk and actually killed off one of its most beloved characters, Brian, it just about killed the show. Brian's death and the introduction of a new dog, Vinny, caused such an outcry amongst fans of the show that they demanded he be brought back to life. See, they hadn't really been planning to remove Brian from the show, but when they took him out of the opening titles for a couple of episodes, it looked like he really was gone for good. Macfarlane says that they were actually really touched by the overwhelming response, and that they hadn't realized that fans had grown to care about Brian so much. Given that the show is one of the most successful in history, and that the entire franchise is now reportedly worth around $2 billion, it seems insane that it almost didn't make it to the air. But actually, Family Guy has King of the Hill to thank for ever making it on TV. See, Macfarlane was pitching Family Guy right as Mike Judge had signed a deal for King of the Hill, but the network was nervous about how Judge's show would do, so they rejected Family Guy. A year later, King of the Hill was so successful that Fox changed their minds and gave Macfarlane $50,000 to make his pilot, and the rest is history.
Family Guy has never been afraid to push some buttons and offend just about everybody, but sometimes even they can seem to go too far. Whether it's shocking, offensive, hilarious, or just plain weird, Family Guy remains one of the most popular shows out there, so they must be doing something right. We hope you enjoy these crazy moments. Make sure to hit the red subscribe button and ring that bell to keep up with the latest from Screen Rant.
Hey there, babe.
Hey, Brian.
You ready? Got the Smash Mouth queued up in the pre.
It's long been acknowledged Brian is a bit of a creep when it comes to women, but in Scammed Yankees, when he becomes obsessed with seducing Meg's teenage friend Patty, not even the biggest Family Guy fans were safe from that shocker. In the Family Guy writer's room, no topic is too sacred to take aim at. Even Anne Frank. In this scene from season 2, when the Frank family are hiding from the Nazis up in the attic, Peter chooses the moment to munch on some very loud potato chips. The barbershop quartet from season 4 became infamous almost as soon as the episode aired. The 4 dapper men singing a horrible diagnosis to a hospitalized patient really proved how much Family Guy loves to walk that fine line between humor and obscenity. Another totally infamous moment which took audiences by surprise was the time Stewie nearly beat Brian to death after Brian fails to pay him back some money that he owes him. It's a nod to the movie Goodfellas and is seriously brutal. The season 11 episode Turban Cowboy features Peter becoming a terrorist as he drives his car through the Boston Marathon, had the misfortune of airing just 1 month before the brutal bombing of 2013 and was pulled from broadcast. While they could not have known what would happen, the coincidence is shocking. When the Bill Cosby story broke in 2015, there was no shortage of comedians skewering the disgraced former star, and Family Guy was no exception. The family gathers to watch what is announced as The Cosby Show, knowing what we know now, and they spare no expense ripping him to shreds. Despite their stance on Cosby, the show still has no problem writing stories for their resident sex offender, Quagmire, who flips from overzealous ladies' man to terrible lech every episode. Like in season 3, when he stumbles across a bound and gagged teenage cheerleader and thinks to himself, jackpot, yikes. Family Guy gets away with all they do because they pretty much offend everyone across the board, which is why the moment when we see God revealing his latest invention, the Asian, and proceeding to list every stereotype in the process made it to air with no problems. The entire episode in which Peter gives himself a stroke by eating too many hamburgers is pretty shocking, as Family Guy has never been to shy away from making light of various disabilities, but the moment when a team of rowers pass him shouting stroke, stroke, stroke really takes the cake. With the FCC being the censors who are in charge of what actually makes it to air, it's surprising they allowed the season 4 song The Freaking FCC to make it to television. It's become a classic since airing and does an amazing job at sending up the agency. Maybe the key to getting away with controversial material is to do as Family Guy does, and put it in a song. Another moment that made us both cringe and laugh is the Prom Night Dumpster Baby song, which deals with the most horrifying subject matter in the catchiest way possible. Peter has been making light of Joe's wheelchair situation for years now. Things got pretty ugly in the episode where Peter denies Joe and his friends access to his restaurant to protect his reputation. Joe then forms the Crippletron, and fans watch minute after minute of handicapped jokes. Of all their adventures, when Stewie and Brian travel back to World War II in order to save Mort from the Nazis is a standout. Especially the moment when, in his Nazi disguise, Stewie finds a McCain pail and pin attached to the uniform. It may be years ago, but the moment is no less funny today. Most of the time, Family Guy's truly offensive stuff is reserved for a quick cutaway, but the episode that centers around Quagmire's sister as a victim of domestic abuse and seems to portray her as at fault and even stupid for staying just comes across as tacky. The Griffins are an unusual family to say the least, but the Halloween episode in which Chris and Meg accidentally hook up with one another in the closet of a party during a masked game of Spin the Bottle takes their hijinks to a whole other level. Family Guy has poked fun at Michael J. Fox and his struggle with Parkinson's disease on more than one occasion. But one that stands out is the cutaway in which they depict him as Zorro, with a mess of lines carved into a wall in place of his iconic Z. The Terry Schiavo musical is such an absurd moment, and another example of how Family Guy loves to push boundaries through song. The elementary school musical about the famous right to die legal case from the 1990s contains some seriously shocking lyrics. An early joke about a JFK Pez dispenser is a very classic Family Guy cutaway. A young kid holds up his brand new JFK-headed toy, only to have the head shot off in a police standoff happening nearby. Don't worry though, he still has his Bobby Kennedy intact. We had to include Quagmire again because he's just too dang raunchy. After he discovers he has a daughter and then gives her up to a more suitable family, he turns to Peter and says, "Who knows, maybe I'll see her again in 18 years. I really hope that he doesn't. The time that Family Guy actually brought in the real O.J. Simpson to star in an episode surprised pretty much everybody who saw it. It seems like they're trying to paint him as a stand-up guy, until the very last moment in which he stabs 3 people and disappears. In the originally unaired episode, When You Wish Upon a Weinstein, Peter sings a song called I Need a Jew that really took audiences by surprise and was filled with every stereotype about Jewish people the writers could possibly fit in there. The episode that some believe to be Family Guy's most controversial ever was actually banned in the United States and deals with Lois's struggle with the decision to get an abortion after the family she was surrogating for dies. It is extremely dark, even for Family Guy. In one episode, Stewie and Brian plan to prevent 9/11. They meet other versions of themselves, all with different reasons why they shouldn't do it. They ask one Stewie why. He simply goes, "This is why," and reveals that he has grown breasts and offers no real explanation as to how.
Family Guy has never held back when it comes to pushing boundaries, and we love them for that. Rather than shying away from edgy jokes, they run headlong into them and let the viewer decide if they really want to stick around for the ride. But sometimes, the network just can't deal, and some of the craziest scenes wind up on the cutting room floor. Lucky for you, we've swept them right back up. Sometimes scenes are cut for content reasons, and some are clearly just way too long to make it to air. But one season 6 deleted scene was very obviously cut for what it contains, as the bit itself is barely 5 seconds long. Peter comments on needing a tattoo removed and rolls up his sleeve to reveal a tattoo that says, "Black people make me uncomfortable." No wonder he wants that one gone, and no wonder they didn't want to let that little moment onto TV either. In the season 12 episode, Baby Got Black, Peter, Quagmire, and Joe make a bet as to which one of them can stay awake the longest. Things go all right until 62 hours in, when the guys really start to lose it and begin hallucinating. In a truly disturbing and surprisingly graphic deleted scene, Quagmire hallucinates Peter's butt turning into a fly and attacking him. In reality, Peter was himself hallucinating that Quagmire was a toilet, which managed to stay in the episode. The fly transition, however, definitely did not make it to TV. Another joke in season 12 might have proven just too hot button for the Fox network's liking, and the fact that they cut this bit is not really all that surprising. Peter sets up a classic Family Guy cutaway gag by telling Chris about the time he was Roe's boyfriend. We don't know who Roe is until it reveals that Peter is in the middle of the famous Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade. When the court rules in favor of Roe, Peter is delighted and tells his very pregnant girlfriend to... Everyone was thrilled to see Cleveland return to Family Guy, no one more so than Peter himself. But when their wives don't get along, Peter and Cleveland are forbidden to see each other, so they start sneaking out to the country to do so. In a long deleted scene, we see the two of them meeting at a cabin, and each time they one-up each other with the drugs they bring to the hangout. First beer, then pot, then acid, crystal meth, and finally, Peter brings 10 rounds of chemotherapy, which for some reason they partake in. Poor Meg. She really just can't catch a break. But maybe by deleting this pretty brutal scene, the network was actually giving her one, for once. In a one-off gag in season 12, an old-timey nemesis of Stewie's shows up as the family is eating dinner and attempts to shoot him. While he just grazes Stewie's arm, Meg ends up taking the bullet right between the eyes. She dies and lies there bleeding from the head in front of everyone. Of course, none of the family pays any attention and completely ignores poor Meg. There's nothing Family Guy loves more than a seemingly random setup for a good cutaway gag, but maybe this one was just a bit too much to air on TV. When commenting on Joe's grilling, Peter says that the burgers he's cooking are still colder than an Asian in-law. They then cut to a white guy being harshly questioned by his Asian father-in-law about his education, job, and yearly salary. The father is bluntly critical until he finds out how much his son-in-law makes per year, before cheering right up after he finds out it's quite a lot. Brian has had a lot of girlfriends over the years, but perhaps his biggest heartbreak was Jillian, the sweet but not so bright blonde voiced by Drew Barrymore. In a deleted scene, when Peter is getting to know Jillian and what kind of wedding she wants, he asks her if she wants a Jewish wedding. When Jillian asks why she'd want that, Peter reveals that he was sneakily trying to find out if she was hiding the fact that she was Jewish. It's pretty questionable why he would even care whether she was or wasn't. We all know that Dr. Hartman is pretty much the worst doctor out there, and really the last person you'd want operating on you. In one particular deleted scene, he really proves why. While Lois is in the hospital, Dr. Hartman enters the room chewing on something. When Peter asks what it is, Hartman actually says it's Lois's tumor, and that a hazard of working in the cancer ward is getting addicted to them. Of all the gross things Family Guy has ever done, they may have seriously outdone themselves with that one. Family Guy isn't known for being very sensitive when it comes to issues about race, but at least they tend to make fun of literally everyone evenly. Even still, some jokes prove too much to let on network TV. Like this one about a girl Brian brings home named Mina. Peter is wowed by how exotic she looks, and when he finds out that she is half Indian and half African American, he says it was smart of her family to breed out the breathing problems. Thankfully, Brian cuts him off before he can explain further. In the episode Spies Reminiscent of Us, Stewie and Brian wind up following Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase to Russia. While complaining that they have made a terrible mistake, Stewie says that coming to Russia was a worse idea than a leper colony doing the hokey pokey. What follows is the single saddest version of the song and dance that you've ever seen, with limbs falling all over the place and the group looking like they're on death's door. Why they would ever decide to give the hokey pokey a try in the first place is beyond us. The episode where Quagmire finds out that he has a baby daughter made everyone a little nervous. After all, Quagmire has a pretty questionable history with women. But one joke in particular proved just a little too much for TV. When Lois and Peter try and help Quagmire learn to change a diaper, Peter comments that Anna has made a big one. Quagmire responds that she does it for free now, but when she's 21, she'll charge extra for it. It's bad enough as is, but the fact that he's talking about his daughter, yikes! Religion has never been a topic that Family Guy is afraid to tackle, especially when it comes to Jesus. Not only does he visit Quahog in person, but he's actually kind of a loser when he does. In the episode where the guys try and help Jesus have his first time, he tries picking up a series of women. One moment was cut, and we bet we know why. He tries out a pickup line on one blonde that, doesn't go so well. Just watch it. Usually, Family Guy jokes don't make it to air because they're deemed a little too dirty or inappropriate for network audiences. But sometimes, and in the case of this one, the joke might just be a little too real. When Peter and the guys get trapped inside an attic together, Peter says that they are locked in a cramped, sweltering room with inhumane conditions, and that the only thing to do is to build some iPads. It's one of those jokes that actually hurts because of the reality it's representing. The episode in which Peter has a stroke was already seriously controversial for its time, so it's pretty surprising that there were any jokes that didn't make it to air. But one of Stewie's was apparently just too far for the network censors, and never made it to broadcast. It features Stewie comparing Peter's disturbing appearance post-stroke to a bad idea hooker, and cuts away to a woman on the street proposing a series of things to passing men that are indeed very bad ideas. Seth Macfarlane has been pretty open over the years about his atheist beliefs, and he isn't shy about working them into the show whenever he can, even if sometimes they don't make it past censors. One in particular leaves nothing to the imagination about his feelings about religion. It features a Christian missionary visiting what looks like a secluded tribesman. The two have a very blunt conversation in which the missionary tries to convince the man to learn all about his imaginary guy, and leaves him a Bible, which he calls some made-up material. Joe has always had a bit of a rough go of it on the show, as much as he tries to make the best of it. When he writes a book called The Hopeful Squirrel, it seems like things might just be looking up. But in one seriously dark deleted scene, it doesn't seem quite as optimistic. In the scene, Joe accidentally runs over a squirrel with his wheelchair, destroying its bottom half. Just as he is about to teach it that it will be okay, a gunshot is heard, and we see that the squirrel has killed itself. Yeesh. Mort, the local pharmacist and resident Jewish character on the show, has taken his fair share of hits over the 17 seasons that Family Guy has been on the air. But it seems that sometimes it's just a little too much. When Brian becomes a realtor, he is looking for someone to buy a property at the Drunken Clam when Mort enters. Brian asks if he knows anyone with money. Mort says yes. Brian asks if he knows anyone who is willing to spend money, and Mort says no, before stealing all of the peanuts and leaving. Why is Quagmire the way he is? Well, a deleted scene offers a pretty obscene answer. When Quagmire's mom shows up while he's in the middle of a court case, she offers some insight into why he is the way he is. One particular scene was cut which took things just a little too far. Literally right after Quagmire's birth, the doctor asks Mrs. Quagmire how she feels. And, well, she doesn't have the reaction you might think. She has the doctor put Quagmire back in and out, and yeah. Apparently, the episode we just mentioned was over the top in more ways than one, as another deleted scene from it was just a bit too much to air. While Quagmire is being questioned in court, he says that his mother not only had an affair with Stephen Hawking, but actually gave him the idea for his theory on black holes. The episode cuts to Professor Hawking giving a lecture and describing a black hole in serious detail, though it's pretty clear he isn't talking about space. We know that Stewie's feelings about murdering people are pretty relaxed, and we've seen him do it on more than one occasion. But one particular deleted scene was apparently a step too far for Fox. While Joe soaks in his hot tub, supported by 4 water wings, Stewie takes out a sniper rifle and shoots holes in each of the floaty devices. While Joe slowly drowns and calls out to Bonnie, we see her standing at the back door, watching and doing nothing to help. It's been clear since the first time we met him that Stewie isn't a regular baby, which has been known to get him into trouble on more than one occasion, like this deleted scene, which gives creepy Herbert a run for his money. Stewie mentions that he is shooting an episode of the show Catfish, and then it cuts to the man he's been catfishing. Rather than hoping that he is on his way to meet another adult, the man is a little too excited at the idea that he's on his way to court a baby. Tom Tucker gets away with saying things on the news that pretty much no other anchor alive would be able to. But even he goes too far for the Fox network, apparently, as it is clear in this deleted scene. When delivering a story about a panda bear in the Quahog Zoo who is sick with tater tot poisoning, he gives a quote by the Chinese ambassador. But instead of a real quote, he just spouts a string of Asian stereotypes like Tiger Bomb, Make Fu Young, and Practice Your Piano Math. Some people might think the jokes about the Holocaust are still too taboo for TV, and seeing as how this one scene was cut from the broadcast, the network might agree. It starts off with Meg making a comment that the world was too slow to respond to the Holocaust before cutting to Peter solemnly agreeing. After a few seconds of silence, he says that they've now earned a joke about an anti-Semitic pigeon, and cuts away to a gag about a couple of birds badgering 2 very stereotypical men having lunch. Peter is an honest guy, sometimes so much so that it gets him into trouble. In this deleted scene, Brian sets up a cutaway of Peter giving a deposition by saying that he never knows what he's doing, and is quickly proven right. While sitting in a room full of lawyers, Peter casually goes over the details of a time when he had time to kill in a hotel room, and things get honest and graphic pretty quickly. Of course, it turns out that they had simply asked him to identify his signature in the first place. And while we'll never side with censorship, this scene that was cut from an episode in Season 6 is a real doozy. We open on Stewie putting together a sniper rifle, talking to Rupert about doing his community service, which it turns out is killing the, shall we say, working woman leaving Quagmire's house. And it doesn't stop there. Once she's dead, rather than being shocked by it, Quagmire gets excited and starts dragging her back inside. Thankfully, he has a change of heart, but we're not so sure that makes up for the rest of the scene.
Family Guy is one of the most popular television shows in the world, so it's no surprise that people like to talk about it. Like any other popular franchise, a lot of that talk centers around the conception of theories related to the characters and stories within the show. In this video, we'll take you through some of the more interesting ones that fans have come up with. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's the best way of keeping up to date with all of Screen Rant's great new videos.
Let's make this quick.
It's no secret that Family Guy creator Seth Macfarlane voices a number of characters on the show. Brian the dog is one of them, and this theory suggests that Brian has been writing the show all along. The theory stems from the fact that Macfarlane barely changes his voice to play the character, as well as the fact that Macfarlane and Brian's views on subjects like politics and religion are the same. Brian is the smartest character in the show and gets to date a string of beautiful women, in spite of the fact that he's not even human, so it makes sense that he would write himself that way. It would also explain the endless cutaway scenes, because Brian's still a dog and has the attention span you'd expect of a canine. Based on the relationships of the characters they voice, there's a theory that Seth MacFarlane secretly has a crush on Alex Borstein. When you consider that MacFarlane voices Brian, Peter, Quagmire, and Stewie, the fact that all of those characters are obsessed with Borstein's character Lois in one way or another certainly raises eyebrows. Ultimately, the theory suggests that the dynamics in the show are the manifestation of MacFarlane's feelings for Borstein in real life. When Stewie traveled with his future self, Stu, into the future in Stu and Stewie's Excellent Adventure, he met a very different version of Meg, as she'd undergone sex reassignment surgery and changed her name to Ron. There's a theory that Ron will actually become a permanent character on Family Guy at some point during its run, allowing Mila Kunis to leave the show. Fox probably wouldn't mind cutting her gigantic salary anyways. Peter Griffin's spending in Family Guy is crazy, and some of the things he's been able to afford, the Peter Copter and the Peterang for example, just aren't consistent with a dumb guy in a menial job. This theory suggests that ever since season 2 of the show, Stewie has been making bank as a Calvin Klein model, and that's what's funding Peter's extravagance. The Griffins have been rich ever since Stewie started modeling in A Picture is Worth $1,000. It makes a whole lot of sense. In spite of the fact we know the intimate secrets of countless Family Guy characters, we still have no explanation regarding why Brian can talk. There is, however, a theory that he's smarter than your average dog because he was once a human who had his brain inserted into a canine body by the CIA. Don't forget, Family Guy is set in the same universe as American Dad, and on American Dad, the talking goldfish Klaus is actually a German athlete who had his brain swapped with a fish by the CIA. It is therefore entirely plausible that all of the intelligent animal characters in Seth MacFarlane's shared animated universe are the product of illegal experimentation by the CIA, including Brian Griffin. Some people have theorized Family Guy is a TV show within a TV show, but there are actually competing theories in relation to it. Some fans argue that Family Guy is a TV show within American Dad, and others argue the reverse, while others believe they're TV shows within each other, which is just kind of trippy. Some people think that Family Guy has always been a TV show within a TV show, but American Dad became one over time. The best evidence is an American Dad episode where Stan lists his favorite fictional dogs, one of whom is Brian Griffin, and there's a Family Guy episode in which the audience gets a behind-the-scenes look at what the actors who play the Griffins go through to film the show. There's also a scene in American Dad where they cut filming to celebrate their 1000th vagina joke, revealing a set and production crew. Could it be that Joe Swanson was the superhero known as the Tick before he became the Griffin's neighbor in Family Guy? There's a theory that suggests so. In fact, there's a sub-theory that he still is the Tick, and that the suit cures his paralysis while he wears it. Joe has the same huge upper body and prominent chin that the Tick has, so it makes sense aesthetically. Then, of course, there's also the fact that Patrick Warburton, who voices Joe, played the Tick in the 2001 live-action show. It's a fun idea, if nothing else. The episode Meet the Quagmires revolved around Peter going back in time and causing himself to end up with Molly Ringwald instead of Lois. The episode featured a joke that many fans have theorized was a prediction of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia's death. In the episode, Death announced that Dick Cheney had shot Scalia in a hunting accident, and a few years later, Scalia died after a hunting trip. Although he died of natural causes while on the trip, some fans of the series still suspect somehow Family Guy was able to predict his death. Family Guy has gradually become darker and darker since around season 8, and there's a very convincing theory as to why that might be the case. In that 8th season, several characters' demeanors start changing. Quagmire went from mere perverted comic relief to having more fleshed out relationships, and Brian began to entertain the idea of suicide, for example. And in each character's case, it's because of their haunting experiences, such as Quagmire's sister being mercilessly beaten by her abusive boyfriend, and Brian being outed as a poor writer. The community of tragic souls in the show essentially fleshes out over time until fans are left with a dark, dysfunctional reality. In 2015, Caitlyn Jenner came out as a trans woman, having previously been Bruce Jenner, a men's Olympic gold medalist. Her transition was a surprise to some, but not necessarily to Family Guy fans. The series made several jokes that now seem like strange coincidence, such as Stewie calling Jenner an elegant, beautiful Dutch woman. In another episode, a cutaway gag showed Jenner performing a burlesque dance for the Navy. At the time, they were joking about the fact that Bruce Jenner's wife, Kris, wore the pants in the family, but the theory is that Family Guy predicted Bruce's transition. There's a very convincing theory that suggests Meg could be Stewie's mother, not his older sister, and that Lois and Brian conspired to hide the teenager's pregnancy. Peter and Kris are far too stupid to figure it out, so it's not completely out of the question, or at least it wasn't until the Yug Lemaf episode, when Stewie's broken time machine caused time to flow in reverse, and the baby is unborn, getting sucked back inside Lois. Then again, given that Family Guy's continuity is all kinds of messed up, it's still a possibility. The episode Brian and Stewie led some fans to theorize that Seth MacFarlane was actually trying to make a terrible episode of Family Guy. It saw Brian and Stewie locked in a bank vault over a weekend, revealing new information to each other and confronting feelings about themselves. It featured none of the hallmarks of the series, so there was no opening theme song and no cutaway gags, for example. The theory suggests that MacFarlane was frustrated with Fox, so he purposefully made a terrible episode. Rumor has it that he was going through depression at the time and was so fed up that he did everything he could to make a bad episode that nobody would like. You know how Meg is often the butt of the Griffin family jokes and how she's generally treated bad by all of them? There's a theory that suggests it's because she's adopted. There have been flashback scenes of both Chris and Stewie's birth, but none of Meg's, so it does make sense on that level. There are also photos of Chris as a baby, but none of Meg. Maybe she didn't arrive in the Griffin family household until she was a little older? There's a theory doing the rounds that Lois is gearing up to end her marriage with Peter. It's based on her character development over time, which points to an increasing number of instances where she shows marital displeasure. This, coupled with the increasingly serialized consequential nature of the show, for example when Brian died and didn't appear for a while, supports the theory that Lois may very well divorce Peter in the near future. One theory suggests Peter and Lois are related, and there's some serious justification to believe it's true. In the episode where Peter found out he had black ancestry, it was revealed that his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was a slave owned by the Pewterschmidt family. At the end of the episode, Peter spoke to his ancestor's ghost, who explained he slept with his owner's wife, who was Lois's great-great-great-great-grandmother. There's also the fact that Lois's dad, Carter, hates the Griffin family and tries very hard to stop any relationship between Peter and Lois from happening. This theory suggests that's because they're related. There's a very interesting theory regarding why the first 3 seasons of Family Guy are bad and weird, and why the characters are different from the rest of the series after it came back from being canceled. It's the theory that pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy take place in 2 different universes. Meg, for example, is loved by her parents pre-cancellation, and in the time travel episode Back to the Pilot, Stewie and Brian go back to the pilot episode and claim they didn't time travel, they actually went to a parallel universe. It certainly makes sense, but there's a simple counter-argument that suggests the writers had to change everything about the show because it wasn't very good, hence the cancellation. There's a theory about Brian that suggests his substance abuse issues are reflected in the apparent de-evolution of his character. And there's no doubt that there's a compelling argument that over time, Brian's alcoholism has morphed his character just as the disease does to its victims in real life. Brian definitely seems to be getting dumber over time, and it's likely because the alcohol he so regularly drinks and the drugs he occasionally uses are having a degenerative effect on his brain. If that's the case, could Seth MacFarlane be trying to send out a subliminal warning of the dangers of substance abuse? Maybe. This one's less of a theory and more of a definitive conclusion fans have come to based on a number of comments and cutaway scenes from the show itself, and it's the idea the Griffins have had a number of other children who have passed away. Peter, for example, has explicitly stated they had a son who died, and even though it's in a gag, it doesn't change the fact he said it. It's also been suggested Meg has killed her younger sister, which means there may have been at least 2 other Griffin siblings. As we mentioned earlier, it's an established fact that American Dad takes place in the same universe as Family Guy. It's also established that Family Guy's little Susie Swanson's inner monologue is voiced by Patrick Stewart, who also voices American Dad's Avery Bullock. This theory suggests the 2 characters are one and the same, sort of. In American Dad, the CIA has a device that allows a person to remotely control an avatar of any shape or size, and in Virtual Insanity, Bullock does indeed have an avatar who just so happens to be a baby. Susie is therefore theorized to be one of Bullock's avatars. The iconic Robin Williams tragically committed suicide in 2014. 2 years earlier, Family Guy aired an episode that made fans theorize that the show predicted his death. Family Guy viewer mail number 2 had a segment in which Peter discovered everything he touched turned into Robin Williams. He became so annoyed and irritated by Williams showing up, he attempted to kill himself several times. It's an eerie coincidence the episode had both Robin Williams and suicide as themes. What's even more eerie is that BBC 3 aired the episode in the UK just moments before Williams' death was announced. On September 11, 2001, Seth MacFarlane was scheduled to depart from Boston on American Airlines Flight 11. 15 minutes after the plane took off, it was hijacked and flown into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Seth was supposed to be on board, but a hangover and a mix-up regarding his departure time meant he arrived 10 minutes too late. Many fans of the series theorized he used the experience as inspiration for the direct-to-video film Stewie Griffin, The Untold Story, which they believe is a 9/11 allegory. Stewie had a near-death near-death experience in the episode and later realized he must go back in time to prevent that from happening in order to fix future events. Moreover, Stewie's future address in the episode is 1109, and after reverting death, he remarked, "Yes, I did it. I stopped the tower from falling." Speaking of Stewie, there's a theory that Family Guy takes place completely in the little guy's head, or more specifically, it's his perception of the world and how he tries to understand it from his limited knowledge. The shenanigans of the show are, therefore, extremely exaggerated because it's all from a baby's perspective. The most compelling part of the argument supporting this theory is Brian has the ability to talk due to the fact that Stewie simply sees the dog as a member of the family, the others of whom could, of course, talk. There's a theory that suggests Family Guy somehow predicted the tragic 2013 death of actor Paul Walker in a car accident. At the time of his death, several conspiracy theories popped up but were quickly shot down. But the Family Guy episode Life of Brian seemed to eerily foreshadow it, especially when Brian was killed by a car. The episode aired just 6 days before Walker died, and the theory suggests that because Walker's name was Brian in the Fast and the Furious movies, that it was a prediction and Family Guy's writers were somehow aware of Walker's impending death. The episode Turban Cowboy had 2 unrelated scenes that caused a considerable amount of controversy and led fans to theorize Family Guy had predicted the Boston bombings. In a cutaway gag, Peter was shown winning the Boston Marathon by mowing down the runners in his car. Later, Peter used a cell phone to accidentally set off a series of bombs. The episode aired roughly 1 month before the bombings occurred. The situation became even more controversial when someone edited the 2 scenes to make it seem like they were connected and furthered the theory that Family Guy predicted the event. However, Seth MacFarlane denounced it and called it abhorrent, and the episode has since been removed from airing. The final theory that we're including here is that Family Guy actually all happens in Peter's head. It's based on the fact that the entire Griffin family have been able to get up to all sorts of hijinks, ranging from the paranormal and societal to the unspeakably expensive and downright illegal, all without any kind of repercussions. Why isn't Meg seriously mentally scarred? Why hasn't Peter bankrupted the family? Why isn't Stewie in a school for naughty children? Well, it's all because none of what we're seeing is actually happening. It's all simply taking place in the Griffin family patriarch's mind as a way of escaping his mundane life.
Let's face it, if you met Glenn Quagmire in real life, the guy would be known as the creep of the neighborhood.
Screw you!
Likely sentenced to multiple years in jail, and not the type of person anyone would want to associate with. But on Family Guy, his predatory nature, addiction to lovemaking above and under the sheets, and twisted ways are all played off for laughs. But has the Family Guy mainstay pushed things too far over the years? Absolutely! And now it's time to pull them all together in a compilation that will probably have you wanting a shower by the time it's over. Giggity giggity goo!
Giggity giggity goo!
When Lauren Conrad guest starred on Family Guy, they put the actress through the ringer, making fun of her MTV personality, her show The Hills, and her life as a reality star celebrity. Then, the show took things one step further by having her in a scene with Quagmire. When her chair is a little uncomfortable, the show cuts to a wide view and reveals Quagmire in some sort of crazy circus-like act. You have to wonder how long she was sitting before she finally noticed. When Brian and Quagmire both joined The Bachelorette, we wondered who would come off worse on the show. Actually, no we didn't. We knew it would be Quagmire, hands down. And he proved us right. Not only did he slip a pill in the drink of The Bachelorette, but he began dragging her body back to his room, all in front of the reality TV cameras. He dropped the body and tried to cover his act. He still tried to get on the action a little by stealing her flip-flop and getting a good whiff of it in his room. All right. Normally, when people exclaim the word jackpot, it's about having a fresh pizza or winning a literal jackpot. In Quagmire's case, it's none of the above. Quagmire stumbles upon a cheerleader. Clearly, he's ready to take advantage with his celebratory phrasing.
Jackpot!
Thankfully, the show cuts away before we see what actually happens next. Not only would the act condone kidnapping and all kinds of assault, but the cheerleader was likely underage too. Giggity giggity gross. Family Guy has never been shy about taking digs at other shows, especially their network rivals, The Simpsons. There was one episode where things got so out of control, the whole segment was cut from broadcast air and only released on DVD. In a fake lower third promo, we see Quagmire force Marge Simpson down, make love to her off screen, and then take her back to the Simpsons' home. Then tragedy strikes when Homer barges in, and Quagmire has no choice but to end the lives of all the Simpsons. And yes, we mean all of them, turning the yellow-skinned family into a pile of blue-skinned gun victims. Quagmire's family is filled with a complicated family tree with branches, twigs, and bushes mapped out all over the place. Some of the main issues go straight up the tree to his own parents. For Quagmire's dad, there's nothing wrong with him per se, but Quagmire has a tough and extremely offensive time accepting his father as a transsexual. No matter how much acceptance is thrown in during the last minute or so of the show, Quagmire treats his father like an animal, constantly hurling insults their way. The cruelty is far worse than some half-effort apology later on. There's nothing more thrilling than going to another state, purchasing some legal fireworks, and bringing them back home to blast off. Well, actually, Quagmire did make a way to find them more interesting. Quagmire transports the fireworks up his backside in an effort to smuggle them into Rhode Island. Only the transportation of them was perfectly legal. Quagmire hinted he knew this, and seemed to store his fireworks for safekeeping just for fun. You'd think a man with constant lovemaking on the brain would understand the deepest and darkest parts of the internet. We learn it's been the complete opposite. Not only does Quagmire not use the internet, but he has no idea about the access to the adult industry available on there. Once he does find out, the guy disappears for days, only to emerge from his house looking a little disheveled. Quagmire's left arm is now massively muscular. We have to imagine that was just from a lot of mouse clicking. Or typing. Yeah, typing.
Giggity, giggity, giggity.
There's something strange going on when Quagmire is dressing up like a baby, and it's nowhere close to Halloween. Quagmire claims he's involved in a family game night, but by the looks of all the nonsense going on in the background, there's nothing family appropriate about it. And this is clearly one family game night nobody wants to win. Just when you thought Quagmire drugging Brooke on the Bachelorette episode was the worst moment, the storyline continues as the ultimate bachelor brings his reality show date home to his mother. Some off-screen dialogue shines some light on Quagmire's disturbing motherly relationship, including his intentions of hooking up with both Brooke and his mother at the same time. Now just imagine if a scene like this was on The Real Bachelorette. Must-see TV right there. In the episode Airport 07, Peter screws up again, this time forcing Quagmire to move into their house and stay the night. Only a sleepover for Quagmire is anything but normal. One of the more disturbing moments, sticking his foot inside Meg's mouth while she sleeps. And this isn't the only time Quagmire has paid some special attention to Meg. If the foot in the mouth of a teenage girl wasn't bad enough, then check out Road to Germany, where Quagmire takes purveyorism to a whole other level. While Meg uses the bathroom, we pan out to reveal Quagmire standing in the shower, holding a video camera. And not surprising at all, but this isn't the first time Quagmire has spied on a Griffin family member in the bathroom, as he did the same to Lois at a bowling alley. Quagmire has no limits, and apparently the Family Guy animators don't either. We've seen Quagmire take advantage of plenty of people while they're alive, but messing with the dead is a whole new level. A shot of a coffin turns crazy real fast when Quagmire pops out, only in his underwear. And oh yeah, there was a dead body inside. Quagmire is kind of the sixth sense, in an even more disturbing way. Not only does he see dead people, but he loves to take advantage of them. Case in point, his deceased wife Joan. When Joan clutches the arm of death, she dies instantly. But before death can take her away, Quagmire has just one more request.
Can you leave that body here for another 5 minutes?
We all know Quagmire has had a thing for Lois, and while he constantly pushes the boundaries and nearly breaks bro code with Peter, the only time he tried to woo her on a date is when Lois and Peter went through a separation. Right off the bat, Quagmire makes the first move, setting up a jacket so the sleeve Lois puts her hand through leads straight to his pants. In the world of the Me Too movement, we imagine this isn't a move that would be okay in today's society. While Quagmire has certainly pushed boundaries with Lois, he completely blew up the bro code on Cleveland and his first wife, Loretta. The whole episode, the Cleveland-Loretta Quagmire, focuses on Quagmire hooking up with Loretta and Cleveland unable to do anything about it. The scenes often push the limits, and Quagmire has his way with one of his best friend's wives several times. The whole affair eventually leads to a divorce, and yet Cleveland and Quagmire remain friends afterwards. Now that's some kind of friendship. While most of Quagmire's inappropriate moments involve the bedroom, bathroom, or open caskets, there's one on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. When Quagmire's sister Brenda finds herself in an abusive relationship with a man named Jeff, Quagmire takes efforts into his own hands to end the abuse. After all the things he's done over the years, Quagmire cannot stand seeing Brenda treated like this. His solution? He runs down Jeff and ends his life in cold blood. Peter and the other guys help Quagmire cover up the death, adding another notch to his long list of immoral behavior. When Quagmire is assigned babysitting duties in the episode Mission Impossible, you assume the worst is going to happen. Turns out he simply wants a brush, so he can take all of Lois's hair out of it and attach it to the hidden blow-up doll he has with Lois's picture attached. We're reaching all kinds of levels of crazy up to this point. There's no denying how forceful Quagmire can be on women. Typically, they can physically get away from him. Just don't try Mace. As revealed in the episode Forefather, a woman attempts to stop Quagmire's advances by spraying mace in his eyes.
Nice try, but I built up an immunity.
Because he's already been sprayed in the face so many times by females before. Not quite the accomplishment to be proud of there, Quagmire. Quagmire knows all the tricks to hook up with a woman. He woos them with words, manipulates them, and if all else fails, he can get them trapped in his special bed, the Holder Downer 5000, as the tool forces victims to lay flat on the bed. You'd think if Quagmire actually applied himself, these innovations and talents could be put to much better use in areas outside of seducing any woman he can get. We've all seen Quagmire hook up with a variety of women, but he hints at much more in the episode Barely Legal. When a large giraffe starts making a move on Quagmire, Quagmire is all about it, until he learns it was a different giraffe than the one he hooked up with before. You have to admit the Quahog petting zoo keeps their cages locked tight whenever Quagmire comes for a visit.
Giraffity! Yeah, see, that's not mine.
For a guy who gets around a lot, you have to imagine he carries a lot of baggage with him. Did we say baggage? Well, we actually meant diseases. Well, in the episode Halloween on Spooner Street, we learn exactly how many diseases he's carrying. And it's a lot. Among the dozens and dozens of diseases, Quagmire carries ones like hepatitis C and gonorrhea. Not really something to brag about. Although we can totally see Quagmire doing just that. Not only has Quagmire spread diseases all over Rhode Island, but apparently his DNA is all over the town as well. Just look at the 3rd grade class at Martin Mull Elementary. A good amount of the children in the class are most likely his. And that's just one class, in a single town. Imagine how many more children Quagmire has outside of the Martin Mull Elementary School. After getting with a girl who lied about her age, Quagmire is finally taken to court over a crime and has to pay the ultimate punishment with a 20-year sentence. But not fast. Quagmire's own mother uses some out-of-the-courtroom persuasion to help get her son's conviction overturned, proving the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. In this case, it's one pretty dirty apple. In the end, the lesson learned is to let your parents help get you off from paying for your crimes? Whether you believe in reincarnation or not, you have to give credit for Peter's active imagination. Peter envisions Quagmire being reincarnated as a protective piece of rubber, one used for the gay couple. Quagmire's reaction was offensive, but the premise was so outlandish in the first place that you cannot even really process what the heck is going on anyway. As Family Guy continues production, the characters connect with the modern world in a variety of ways. In Quagmire's case, he learns about the world of Tinder and his life changes forever. In a pretty crazy montage, Quagmire uses Tinder to go on a marathon of dates, where the dating element is pretty much eliminated. A whole bowl of Trojans gets depleted in the fast-forward series of clips, and Quagmire swipes right on every single person on the app. He becomes so addicted his body depletes from its natural form, and it's up to Peter and his pals to rescue the man from his Tinder obsession.
Family Guy might seem like the type of show that leaves nothing to the imagination, but actually they sneak tons of hidden Easter eggs into every episode. These moments are so quick that if you blink, you might just miss them. But when you see them, just add to the hilarity. We all know that Family Guy is pretty meta. They reference themselves and the fact that they're a TV show all the time, which is why this first Easter egg is no surprise but hilarious nonetheless. In one very quick moment in the episode called The Story on Page 1, Peter grabs a TV guide featuring Luke Perry on the cover. But what you might have missed is that in the corner of the page, the magazine reads, "If you can read this, Family Guy is on the air." We love a Family Guy Road 2 episode. They're always packed with amazing songs, hilarious adventures, and some great Brian and Stewie back and forth. But the episode Road to Rupert has even more going for it than the others, because of one awesome Easter egg right at the beginning. When the family is holding a garage sale, Brian and Stewie are sitting together at a table. In front of Brian are a stack of DVDs, but not just any old movie. He's selling the Family Guy movie, Stewie Griffin: The Untold Story. Family Guy has been nailing the Easter egg game since the very beginning, as we can see in the Season 2 episode Love Thy Trophy. In it, there's a quick shot of Stewie playing with blocks, and what he spells out might go over some people's heads. We've always known he was diabolical, but the fact that he has spelled out red rum in toy blocks really solidifies that fact. For those who might not know, red rum is a reference to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Read it backwards if you dare. Family Guy had really found its stride by Season 4, and the amazing episode North by North Quahog proves it. In this episode, Peter and Lois wind up in Mel Gibson's private suite on their second honeymoon. Once there, they find a secret copy of The Passion of the Christ 2, and there's a great Easter egg to be found in it. During a car chase with Jesus, yep, you heard that right, Jesus' license plate reads WWID, which is a really funny take on the classic phrase, "What would Jesus do?" Brian has been trying to make it as a writer since the very beginning, with pretty varied levels of success. In the episode Brian Does Hollywood, he winds up in LA directing adult entertainment. When at the Adult Film Awards, an award for Best Musical Score is announced, and the nominees are an awesome inside joke. Both Ron Jones and Walter Murphy are nominated, two composers who create all of the amazing music in Family Guy. The third is John Williams, the legendary Hollywood film composer. An episode that features a Jewish character accidentally getting sent back to Germany in the middle of the Second World War could have gone badly, but luckily Family Guy totally nailed it with the episode Road to Europe. When Mort Goldman winds up in Berlin, he, Stewie, and Brian must impersonate SS officers to get the supplies they need to get back home. Having snuck into a lab, one of the scientists shows Stewie what they've been working on: 100 Luftballons. Well, until one pops and an amazing reference to the 80s classic 99 Red Balloons is born. If you're a film buff, you might have heard of a little something called the Wilhelm scream. First heard in the western Distant Drums, the Wilhelm scream is a very particular recording of a man screaming that has long since become something of an inside joke in Hollywood. It has been used in almost 400 movies, including the Seth Macfarlane favorites Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And also, of course, in Family Guy. They've actually used it a handful of times, and definitely as a reference to Star Wars. While most of us would assume that the name Meg is short for Megan, that's probably because we grew up with parents who aren't Peter Griffin. In a surprising twist in a Season 12 episode, a very quick gag reveals that Meg's full name is actually Megatron. Those of you out there who aren't Transformers fans might not realize that this is a reference to that famous franchise. But you know who would know? Seth Macfarlane, without a doubt. As a huge fan of 1980s pop culture, it's no surprise that Seth Macfarlane would take any opportunity to sneak in a reference to the classic, if pretty questionable comedy, Revenge of the Nerds. And that's exactly what he did in this amazing Easter egg from the episode Peter's Progress, when a fortune teller teaches Peter all about his family history. In fact, it's almost a shot-for-shot remake of the iconic talent show scene, and is heaven for any hardcore 80s nostalgia fans out there. Sometimes, like the Revenge of the Nerds sequence, the Easter eggs are out there for us to see. And some, like this one from the episode One If by Clam, Two If by Sea, are so quick and so subtle that only the sharpest viewers can pick them out. In a scene that parodies a sequence from the movie Tron, the 1982 version of course, a sign can be seen in the background written upside down that reads, "If you can read this, your TV is upside down." All of the actors on the show have pretty amazing careers outside of it. So, if they can find an opportunity to poke a little fun at their other jobs, the creators never miss a chance to sneak something in. Like in the episode Don't Make Me Over, when Meg gets a makeover and the family forms a pop group. When Meg becomes a sensation, she gets an assistant by the name of Mrs. Swan, who was one of Alex Borstein's most popular characters on the show Mad TV. You might not realize that the famous Family Guy opening titles are actually an Easter egg all on their own. The idea of the family sitcom featuring the bumbling dad, stay-at-home mom, and awkwardly endearing kids is an old TV trope. The opening titles are in fact a reference to the classic TV sitcom that started it all in the Family, where we see Peter and Lois copying exactly what Archie and Edith Bunker do in their musical opening. Remember the guy who used to run around Quahog calling everyone a big fat phony? Of course you do, he used to be a fan favorite character. Well, while the character didn't have a name to begin with, the writers eventually dubbed him Holden Caulfield, after the main character of J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. After a while, the Family Guy character became a huge inside joke from the writers' room. Another thing that Family Guy has become fond of is slipping in character cameos from Seth Macfarlane's other shows, especially American Dad. In the episode Meet the Quagmires, everyone's favorite alien Roger makes an appearance right at the very end. When he shows up, he says the line, "Francine, did you remember the pecan sandies?" which is actually the very first line that was said in the pilot episode of American Dad. Sometimes the Family Guy writers like to push things a little further and slip in jokes that might not be immediately obvious to everyone. In the episode Brian Goes Back to College, there is a scene featuring a big football game. In a very quick moment, it reveals the scoreboard, on which we see that the teams are Brown versus the Board of Education. This is of course a reference to the landmark Supreme Court ruling that segregated schools were unconstitutional. But because Brian is attending Brown University, they couldn't resist the pun. While the entire premise of the episode Baby Not on Board is based off the John Hughes Home Alone movies, there is one moment that only big Hughes fans might have picked up on. When Lois and Peter get into a fight because Peter wasted the family's money on shower curtains filled with helium, Peter launches into a monologue. What you might not know is that this is almost word for word taken from another John Hughes movie, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. The episode And I'm Joyce Kinney showed a whole other side of Lois, but it also snuck in a detail about an uncanny similarity between the new news anchor in town, Joyce Kinney, and one of Family Guy's long-running writers. When Joyce tells the story of how Lois used to bully her back in high school, Lois realizes who she is and exclaims, "You're Joyce Sheva Pravatdom wrong." That incredible last name that took me about 7 tries to get right was taken from Family Guy writer Cherry Sheva Pravatdom wrong. It seems that the Family Guy team is pretty fond of giving characters familiar names, though in this case we hope that's where the similarities end. We all know that Neil Goldman is the nerdy on-again off-again love interest of Meg, who unfortunately has a handful of health problems and isn't so lucky with the ladies. Well, as it turns out, Neil is actually named for another one of the Family Guy writers. We wonder if Jennifer Love Hewitt is his cousin in real life too, just like on the show. We've said before that the Family Guy writers like to poke fun at the other projects of their cast. Possibly no one more than Robot Chicken. Sure, Family Guy is never shy about making fun of other movies and TV shows, but this one is particularly personal because Seth Green, who voices the character of Chris, is the creator of Robot Chicken, and they rib him for it a lot. The episode Lois Kills Stewie was crazy, and not just because it featured a mother trying to end the life of her maniacal baby, but also because of one Easter egg that was almost too much for TV. At one point, as the family comes up with outrageous rumors about celebrities, Peter suggests that they start one saying that Rob Schneider pays migrant workers from Home Depot to, well, provide him with a strange service. This is actually a callback to an earlier episode where Joe says the same thing during a drinking game. The creators of Family Guy know that putting Mayor Adam West on screen is enough to distract the audience from anything else that might be going on, which is why they used one of his infamously strange speeches to sneak in a super subtle animation joke. In the episode Family Guy Viewer Mail Number 1, when the Griffins gain superpowers, Mayor West announces his plans to defeat them. Right as he runs off stage, if you look carefully, you can totally see a man in the audience putting his hand on a woman's rear end. Back in the day, when if you weren't watching Family Guy on TV, you were popping in a DVD to satisfy all your binging needs, they snuck an Easter egg onto a newspaper headline that was gone in an instant if you didn't move fast enough. In the episode Model Behavior, the Griffins win a boating race and become front-page news. Under the headline Lower Middle Class Family Wins Regatta, another smaller headline contains the real joke. It reads, DVDs paused for headline joke. Millions disappointed. Seth Macfarlane was destined to be successful in the world of cartoons, and after a rocky start has cemented his place in the industry. But in the episode I'm Dying, I'm Lying, they make an amazing reference to one of his earlier not-so-successful projects. In the episode, Peter gains some powers and uses it to demand that the network revive his favorite cancelled buddy cop show, Gumble 2 Gumble. Turns out, Gumble 2 Gumble was an idea that Macfarlane had pitched to Fox years earlier to no avail. You might think that Adam West is the one and only Mayor West out there, and on one hand, you're right. But on the other hand, in the episode You May Now Kiss the Guy Who Receives, Mayor West bans gay marriage in Quahog. At one point, he randomly says, "I'm the only Mayor West that's in trouble." Well, it sounds random until you remember that there was an actual Mayor West who was openly against marriage equality as well. Until his career ended in, you guessed it, a gay scandal of his own. The Star Wars Family Guy episodes will go down in history as some of the best cartoon episodes of all time for sure. And this awesome Easter egg from Blue Harvest is sure to solidify that spot. When when Luke walks into the Mos Eisley Cantina, there are a ton of aliens and other random creatures hanging out together, jamming out to that one catchy song. But look closely for cameos from the Evil Monkey, Bender from Futurama, Coach John McGuirk from Home Movies, and Roger from American Dad. We love those blink and you'll miss them moments. What about you? Did we miss any great ones that we have to know about? Had you spotted any of these before, and if so, how many? Let us know down below, and we hope you had fun watching.